TV matters.
I'm Bernie Furshpan, host of Raised by Survivors here on hmTV at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center here in Nassau County. Generally, when I do these podcasts, I bring on children, descendants of survivors, not just the Holocaust, but other genocides as well. But today I have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, Betty Pilnik, who was raised by survivors in her home in Brooklyn and the Bronx, and she's got an incredible story to tell us. Thank you so much for joining me today,
You're welcome.
Betty.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great meeting you. And what a surprise that was.
That was
That was a surprise.
huge.
So I spoke at the JCC in Oceanside.
Yes, you did.
And then you came up to me afterwards.
Yep.
And I don't know if you said, I don't know if you know who I am, but...
No. So my mom was honored at the JCC in Oceanside, and she got to light a candle that evening. And 2 weeks before that, she met a new friend. And unbeknownst to us, when we got into the building and we got into the room, her new friend, Pearl, was in the audience because she too, a Holocaust survivor,
Right.
got the same honor.
Yes.
And so the two friends who just met 2 weeks before that, they had this connection, met each other again at the JCC, and they each lit a candle. And as we were sitting there and you were speaking, I saw your name up on the board, and the name was so familiar to me. And I knew that I knew the name. And I just kept thinking and thinking. And I said to my brother, who was sitting next to me, I said, Paul, I know that name. And we're listening. And I said, I think he has a connection to the Pilniks. And my brother said, but my brother knows I have a really good memory. Sure enough, I had to ask you. Mm-hmm. And I really still didn't know. But then when I came up to you and I said to you, and I thanked you for the great speech, and I said, it's a crazy question, but do you have anything to do with the Pilniks? And your eyes opened up and you said, Malka Pilnik?
Yeah.
Paul Pilnik?
Right.
I said, I'm Betty Pilnik.
Oh, wow.
And you said, how are you Betty Pilnik?
Right.
And I said, I was married to Paul Pilnik.
Right.
So you said, the only thing I know about Paul Pilnik is that he loves horses.
He loves horses.
I said, that's the
and
Paul Pilnik.
he still does. He always loved horses, but you
Yes.
know what? They were such dear friends.
Yes, and so that's what
We
you
grew up together. We went on vacations together.
Yes, that's what you told me.
You know, we went to each other's bar and bat mitzvahs,
That's right.
you know, and so we were very close, very tight. Our parents were very close, and they were all survivors.
All
and the thing
survivors.
about survivors is that they kind of stuck together, especially in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
And many other places around the world. But in Brooklyn in particular, there's certain areas where survivors kind of gathered. And then in the summers, we went up to
The
the
Catskills.
Catskills. And my mother, and we went together. And my mother and Sarah Pilnik, you know, they used to look for souvenirs. And we had ashtrays from every single hotel. I mean, from the Nevelys, the Concord, the Tamarack.
The Browns,
The Browns. I mean, I think we had them all. They were big smokers.
I bet.
The Holocaust
I bet.
survivors. They were big smokers. They were really
bet.
into it. And I loved being raised by my parents. They were so. They were doting over us a little bit to some degree. And then there were times where they allowed us to be very independent as well.
Right. I had a similar experience.
So tell me about it.
So I wasn't raised by my grandparents, but they were very close. They actually lived around the corner from us. So when I looked out my window of my bedroom, I could see my grandmother in her backyard. So I grew up with 4 grandparents. My father's side has the story, I guess you call them the lucky ones. They didn't go to the concentration camps. They were able to run and settle in Siberia and work the coal mines. And they suffered. But my grandma and grandpa, my Baba and Zaida on my mother's side, they both were in Bergen-Belsen. So I was raised by my mom and dad. My mom was born in a DP camp right after the war. So my grandmother was married before the war, and so was my grandfather, but they lost their entire families. So when they met at the DP camp, from what I heard from them is that people were encouraged to get married. They were looking for love. They were looking for connection. They were looking to rebuild their lives.
Of course. By the way, just a side note, that the highest birth rate in the world at that time was in the DP camps.
Those are the baby boomers, right?
Right.
Those are the baby boomers. Interesting. I never thought of it that way. Well, I could see why. You know, they apparently, if you were married, you had a better chance at sponsorship to leave the DP camp. So my Zaida, Moisha, and my Baba, Regina is her real name, but we always called her Baba Gina, because at the time our cousin couldn't say Regina, so he would just say Gina, and that was her name up until the day she died, Baba Gina, Baba Regina Diamond. So they met at the DP camp, and it was rough. It was rough. It wasn't hell, but it was tough. And they married, and there they conceived my mother, Sarah Henna Diamond. And so they did get a sponsor from Binghamton, New York. I was told the name was Drimmer, the Drimmer family. I would have to definitely double check, but I'm pretty confident that was the name of the family. I remember that they were in the meat business. As a matter of fact, if you go to Israel today, they were part of an organization. And when you go to the site, we went to see all about Ben Gurion's home. There's actually like a visitor center, and I saw the name Drimmer, and all of a sudden, you know, I was like, that might be the same Drimmer. I don't know. These are some of the things I have to fact check.
Sure.
But anyway, so my grandparents left Landsberg DP camp with my mom in tow, and came to Binghamton, New York. And they stayed there for 2 years. And a very interesting note I just want to share with you. When they left, they got a stipend. And the number $750 stays with me. And my grandmother told me that some people bought clothing or jewelry or whatever it was they wanted. That money was given to them by the organization, or maybe they worked a little bit and to start again in the country that they were going to. My grandparents wound up coming to America. And so my grandmother, she was a businesswoman of our family, you know, and here's just another example. She didn't buy clothes or jewelry. She went and bought Rosenthal china. And they brought boxes of Rosenthal china back with them to America. And once they settled, my grandmother would sell it. And so she started this Rosenthal china business. People would come and go.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, she was a good businesswoman.
Oh, she was.
Did you learn from that?
I did.
You did. You see, that's what I'm talking about. So what else did you learn from them? Did you learn any life lessons, any values? Like from my dad, I learned from my father not to be afraid to make changes and to be a good fixer, you know, find solutions for problems. So I learned those things from my dad just by watching him. Are there any things that you learned from your grandparents and your parents?
Well, I don't think I understood it growing up, but as an adult, when I look back, I see some things that, that's why I'm like that.
Right.
You know, when I tell the kids, don't waste this, don't waste that.
Right.
You know, they would always say, it's a shoo-it, it's a waste.
Right.
A shoo-it is a waste. Like,
well, my dad, even when I was a kid, a teenager, I'd come out of the bathroom.
Right.
They would put a new roll of toilet paper. Half of it is gone.
Right.
My dad said, what happened to half the toilet paper? He says, I didn't have toilet paper in the forest. So he appreciated every square on that toilet paper.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
So what I learned from them is to be able to take something. I mean, my Zaida Moisha, he would, you know, eventually they settled in the Bronx, and that's where my mother grew up. But then when my mom got married, and she lived in Brooklyn near some other people that are familiar to you, near Rena and Svika. My mom actually met Rena in that part of Brooklyn. I can't remember the name right now. But
Canarsie?
Not Canarsie. It was before Canarsie. It was
Georgetown.
Maybe Pitkin.
Georgetown. Oh, Pitkin.
No, Pitkin.
Oh, that's Flatbush.
Flatbush.
That's the Flatbush section, yeah.
So my Zaida and Baba, they eventually bought a house in Canarsie. They helped my parents buy a house, and then on East 84th Street, and then around the corner on East 85th Street, their house was just a little bit bigger. And eventually they moved. So my grandparents would come visit more often, because before we would only see them, on weekends, and now we would see them almost daily, which was nice. I don't think my parents were thrilled with that all the time, the unannounced Sunday morning visits, but they would always bring something. I remember one specific thing my Zaida brought us. He found something in the garbage somewhere, and he made a little chair out of it. It was like a piece of paneling, like a paneling that you would put on the wall, and a metal structure. And he made a little chair out of it, like a little kiddie chair, And so I learned from them that things aren't always garbage. You can reuse them. You can recycle. Oh, there's a good one. Recycling.
Oh, that's good. That's a good lesson, actually.
Recycling, yeah.
Yes, I learned that too, actually. That's a good one.
Yeah.
We have a lot in common that way, because children that are raised by survivors pretty much learn similar lessons, but we also inherit some of their trauma.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I remember my dad used to wake up sometimes in the middle of the night crying, and my mother would shush him like the boys are sleeping. I could hear it.
Yeah.
And because he had nightmares, he was haunted by the things that he experienced in the forest.
Bernie, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did you have nightmares?
I had nightmares after I watched my parents react to some of these films that they played on TV. They don't show them anymore, the very explicit films of naked bodies, piles of bodies in the death camps, and they would sit there and sob. And that's when I first got the hint, the idea that they are somehow involved with this, before they told me that they were survivors. I was very young. I must have been about 7 or 8. But that impacted me, and it did give me nightmares, because I didn't know that people can do this to other people. I was very naive. We're all naive, right? We're born naive.
I'm going to share something with you that I haven't really shared with too many people, but I feel comfortable because I actually have been putting together some information, hoping to present some of it, and I think some of it might be interesting to
And you're writing a book as well.
Well,
or at least that's your hope.
I'm putting together something. If it'll be a book, I'm not sure, but certainly something to share.
Right.
So I never understood why, since I'm a little girl, I have nightmares about the Holocaust. I'm in the Holocaust. And they would happen daily, weekly, up until last week. I never understood why. Why would I have those dreams? And I guess I figured, because my Baba told me a lot. She didn't tell my mother. I got the stories. And so from a very young age, she started telling me things. And my father's parents also told us things. They actually showed us pictures.
Right. They were in the camps in Bergen-Belsen, right?
No, my mother's parents, Baba Gina and
see.
Zaida Moshe, were in the Bergen-Belsen. But my Baba Manya and Zaida Leibish, who have their own story, and my Zaida did a testimony, which is available, and I could share with you another time. They went to Siberia. And from Siberia, I think they went back to Poland. I have to check that fact. I think they went back to see if they could, and they just weren't welcome, and they went to Israel. So that's where my father grew up. But getting back to the nightmares, I could never understand why. I was never in the Holocaust. Why do I have such detailed dreams? The colors, the sounds, the smells. And I could never understand why. And it was only until last year when I started doing some research on intergenerational trauma that I put together that that's where it's coming from, most likely, And it's not a bad thing. It's unfortunate. But I'm always in the Holocaust, and I'm always with my brother and my sister. I'm the oldest of 3. I have a brother, Paul, and a sister, Sharon. She's the baby. Paul's in the middle. And I'm always responsible. It was always my job to get them out. I would always get them out. We had to get out. It was urgent. We weren't safe. And that was all the different dreams. And, I wear glasses, and I always used to be afraid, what if in the dreams, they would take my glasses. How would I get us out if I couldn't see?
So you've kind of inherited some of that anxiety.
Absolutely.
And I got to tell you, this is the first time I've ever heard that before. I've never heard that before, where a child of a survivor actually had night. Yeah, even a grandchild.
I'm a grandchild.
Right. I've never heard any descendants of survivors, basically, who had nightmares that they actually lived through the Holocaust. I've had nightmares about it, but not that I actually lived through it. You actually have very detailed nightmares. And so that's a huge impact, that they pretty
huge
much,
impact.
Left you with a legacy that's pretty, first of all, filled with resilience, the fact that they survived, but also filled with trauma and pain and hurt. But the fact is that they survived, and that's not an easy thing to do, because Hitler had the intention of killing every single Jew, and he was very successful in killing 2/3 of all the Jewish occupants in Europe and 90% of all the children.
Well,
thank God that we defeated Hitler, that the Allied nations defeated him, because who knows what the world would be like if we didn't. I feel fortunate to some degree. I hate to say it, but I miss my parents so much. But I'm kind of happy that they're not around to see what's going on today.
Oh, yeah.
I think they would be mortified, honestly.
Well, I know plenty of people that are very sad about it.
Right.
And but even with that resilience that they have helps them through it.
Right.
They have that resilience.
Let me ask you, so
Yes.
What kind of food did you eat at home? My mother took on a maternal role for my dad because he lost his mother. He loved his mother. At probably around the age of 11, when they were all killed. He was the only survivor in a family of 8. And so she raised my dad, and besides my brother and myself, and made him the food that reminded him of his mom. The kishka, chopped liver, stuffed cabbage. She bought him dill pickles, and then she made this thing called pacha.
Oh.
Okay, so that to me is...
That wiggles.
It wiggles, that's what I say.
It wiggles.
It wiggles, it jiggles, and it smells like a dead body. It really does.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I ever got close enough to smell it. Because just looking at it and knowing what it could do, I just
remember
stayed far
opening
away.
up the fridge, and I would say, "Mom, why can't you make us spaghetti and meatballs like the Russos next door?"
Right.
And she said, I don't know. They didn't have Instagram then. They didn't know what else you can do. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have other recipes. They only brought the family recipes that they knew. That's it. And so my dad loved it. He loved shchav, that green sorrel leaf soup that smells like a sewer.
I wasn't fortunate enough to have a taste
It was
that.
terrible. It was Let me tell you something. But I love my parents. I just didn't understand why she couldn't make American food. Then she ran out in a panic and she bought shake and bake. And she thought this is American food. So my brother and I were raised on shake and bake. God bless her.
Yeah.
Really, she was an angel.
You asked about the food.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, I was raised by, 4. I had 4. I was lucky enough to be raised with 4 grandparents. I mean, and it's just incredible to me. But I thought everybody's grandparents were from Europe, and I thought everybody's grandparents were in the Holocaust. It wasn't until I grew up and I realized that Jews are not the only ones in the world. We lived in a very tight community.
Yeah, and isolated too.
And then I realized, Jews also live in Queens, even Long Island.
Right.
Even Suffolk County.
Yep. Even in Australia and China.
Right. So my grandmother, my Baba Gina, she wasn't the cook. I mean, she cooked, she made things, but you wouldn't go, I got to go have Baba's food. It wasn't like that, And I remember as a little girl, I didn't know why, but she just ate what she needed to survive, and she really ate mostly, fruits and vegetables. Always, when she came over, she brought the carrots, she brought the apples, she brought the oranges. Eat the carrots; they're good for your eyes. Eat the apples; it's healthy. All different stuff. But she would make us on a bagel with butter, and she would take a big Hershey chocolate bar, and she would take a knife or like something you would use to peel an apple, and she would shave the chocolate onto the bagel with the butter, That's what I remember eating that I loved from her. Or she would take halva and do the same thing and cut the halva and put the halva. So it was always something sweet.
Yeah.
And I definitely have a sweet tooth, so I have no doubt that, comes from my family.
Right.
But so she wasn't this big cook. No, that's not what my other Baba Manya, she was the cook in the family. You'd want to go to her house and eat. Baba Manya, you'd go to her house, to eat all the different things. She'd make that pacha and stuff. Well, I wouldn't eat any of that.
What are your hopes for the next generations and for your future grandchildren?
In terms of education?
In terms of education, having a better world to live in?
Bernie, I would tell you that ever since I'm a little girl, I've experienced anti-Semitism. And I think that if you speak to most people my age, they might share the same thing depending on where they lived. And I lived in a neighborhood that was half Italian, half Jewish, and I still experienced the anti-Semitism. I don't think that's ever going to go away. I do think there needs to be more education, and I watched your documentary, and it was incredible. And I hope that more people watch it. I've shared it with people, Jews and non-Jews, and I got really, really amazing feedback.
Wow, thank you.
One of my
appreciate that.
One of my non-Jewish friends commented to me that you're a mensch.
That's nice.
And so I always get a kick out of when, non-Jews use Yiddish to describe things. But I hope and I pray that everyone learns a little bit more, the schools teach a little bit more. I'm skeptical about it.
Like you said, if we educate the youth about tolerance, being kinder to one another, understanding that we're all related and that we all share this tiny little planet, that we can do better. Can't we do better? Can't they reach higher? And hopefully, maybe there's going to be a change in trajectory, hopefully. We always hope. That's the whole thing about the Jewish community, is the word hope. That's the biggest word, the most important word, is you never give up hope. And the fact that we are so resilient, the fact that we're still here, it's like refining steel. And all of the impurifications, right? Impurities, they fall off. And so we are the best of survivors. Really, we are survivors as well, because we learned survival techniques and skills, even though it wasn't taught to us formally, but we learned it from our parents. I think I am hopeful.
You are.
I
That's
am hopeful, and you have to stay hopeful, because if you're if you're desperate and there's too much despair, it's not a good thing either. It's not a good thing either. So I think we have to stay hopeful. The Israeli national anthem is called Hope, the Hope.
Right. That's right.
And so we have to stay with that and stay focused on it, because we hope that in the future things will get better for everybody, not just the Jewish community, because, hate impacts everybody. It's not just, we're just a canary in the mine, as they say, but it impacts everybody. During the COVID pandemic, it was anti-Asian campaigns, and before there was anti-Latino and anti-Black. So hate has no discrimination. It impacts everybody.
Bernie, I shared this with my kids, and I've probably shared it with some friends, but I almost feel like if the aliens came down to us and they were our common enemy,
right?
Not until then would the whole world have to get together to fight the aliens. I think about that. No,
it's so true. And I can't believe you said that, because that is the example I use. Because that's a common enemy. I'm thinking, what is a common enemy? An asteroid hitting the planet?
The aliens.
The aliens, yes.
Not the nice aliens.
We need aliens. Right, we need aliens so that we have a common enemy. But it's so true. I mean, even after 9/11, right? This country.
That's when I started thinking that
right,
way.
When you were on the right or on the left or in the center, if you were centrist, it didn't matter. We all united.
That's right.
And there is common languages that we all have. The arts brings people together as well. So we do have a common language. We have to spend more time focusing on our common languages, on the common things that we all have, and realize that we're more the same than different. Thank you so much for making the time today. Time is our most valuable resource.
Oh, definitely.
And I appreciate you took the time to come here and spend the day with me and talking about your family and what it was like being a descendant of Holocaust survivors. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to thank my listening audience. I'm Bernie Furshpan of Ordinary Heroes here on hmTV at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Until next time.